Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. And the
I'm going to go
your
ahead and
share
pull.
your share screen disappeared.
Yeah, I'm going to pull that back up right now. I'm trying
Okay.
to admit people and share screen at the same
Confusing.
time.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, as with so many things that we're doing during COVID, I fully acknowledge that I'm doing this a bit by the seat of my pants. So it's really great to see you all here. And thanks to the Prosper Portland team for bringing us together. I wanted to ask Amy if you can provide me with the separate virtual ground rules, or if I can refer to you to read those out.
I mean, I think that this is really something that we've allowed our facilitator to go ahead and orient folks on, but I think it's more simply like how you want to field questions. Do you want people to put questions in the chat, or do you want folks to raise their hand?
I see. Okay. Okay. So that's primarily the thing that you want me to focus on. Are there any other housekeeping rules that you want me to share?
Yeah, I sent some in an email earlier today. Let me go ahead and pull that up. I think
I can pull that back up.
Okay. And then the only other thing that I didn't mention in there that we might want to make note of is that we will be recording the session.
And Jeff, I haven't met you before, so can you tell me about your work?
Sure. I work with Jessica in the Public Health Division at the county. My program is responsible for licensing of restaurants, food carts, pools and spas, hotel motels. We're involved with a lot of businesses throughout the county.
Okay, great. Because I know some of the other folks who are going to be speaking, but we haven't had a chance to meet. So thank you for joining. And then Torrey has been familiar with the sessions, you said, Amy, so he's not here right now.
That's correct.
So Torrey will pass the torch over to Rehana.
Yeah, and feel free to jump in, Ashley, and facilitate that transition if that seems appropriate.
Oh, would you prefer that I do that?
I think it makes it flow a little bit better.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'll just look to Torrey. I mean, I'm assuming he'll, let me know when he feels complete. Now, have previous listening sessions taken Q&A in between the speakers, or has it all waited till the end?
I think certainly if we see some questions come up that are appropriate for a person to answer at that point in time, you could always field them. But I think for most folks, they just feel like it's easier to have that Q&A time.
Mm-hmm.
But you can certainly just kind of let it flow, just kind of based on how things are going.
Okay. And Jeff, is Jessica attending? Will she be on later?
Jessica's on now.
She's on.
Oh, she is. Oh, I'm
here.
sorry.
I'm here. Sorry, I'm here.
Oh, hi.
You on? Sorry.
I think, Jessica, you were on. Did you present to the BBPDX call with Chair Kafori?
I've been on so many calls.
Yeah, you look very familiar. I'm pretty sure that it was you. Yeah. So we'll start with you, and then you'll introduce Jeff. Is that how you're planning on? Is that how you would prefer it to be? Okay.
Sure. Is that okay, Jeff?
Yep, that's fine for me. I'm really here for answering any technical questions and anything that needs to be done. Yeah.
So I think one thing I would want to just call out in the introduction is that even though this is a listening session, that we are going to be spending the first almost 60 minutes on presentations, and maybe try to temper people's expectations around questions. So if they have like a very specific question for that particular speaker, that they could go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm asking for advice here, as opposed to waiting to the end where they may have more general questions that aren't specific to that particular speaker as a way of being able to keep moving?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. What I would do is just tell people if you have any questions after during the if folks have questions, you can either ask them to raise their hand or put their question in the chat, just kind of however you feel most comfortable fielding that question.
Okay. Okay. And then remind me, you said you have 37 registered. Has that increased since this morning?
I have not looked. Catherine, have you seen an increase since this morning?
Let me look right now. We have, looks like, okay. There's 4 people in the waiting room, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not part of the panel, so I'm waiting to admit them until 2 o'clock.
Oh, Scott Young registered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So I'm going to move myself back inside. EB, since you're the first industry speaker, is there a particular way that you would like me to tee up your remarks?
Not necessarily. The 2 things I'm going to be asking about are with regard to assisting with ending a lease, and that could be, assistance in terms of banks and regulations. Any advice on that? And I'm also going to be referring to parks, if that's not already covered, use of parks and permits and cancellations and fees and such. So that's what I'm going to add. That's what I'm going to speak to.
Okay. And what about you, Devlin?
Our main concerns primarily is similar to EB. So we have messaged our leasing agent and our property manager and have heard 0 response back in terms of trying to renegotiate our lease. So our questions are primarily focused on the landlord-tenant relationship and how to navigate that. And then also more assistance from Oregon or Multnomah County on the masks and sanitizer. Like, we got our package, but it's 25 complimentary masks that we're required to have. And we are going to have around 100 people going in and out of our building every day. And then finally, any questions around business bankruptcy, there's many businesses who are closing permanently because of the COVID shutdown, and what are our steps in terms of closing because of COVID? And is there any resources that the Multnomah County has in terms of that?
Or another agency.
Or another agency,
yeah,
right, yeah.
And if I could ask the Prosper team, on your other sector-specific listening sessions, have you found that it was helpful to just allow the industry representative to ask their questions and for the appropriate person on the panel to field that question at the time?
I mean, I think so. I think that's what we've done. It's been pretty organic. I think, Ashley, your intuition will tell you.
Yeah.
Someone puts a conversation in the chat and it feels like, oh, here's something that's really pertinent to what we're talking about. Let's make sure we address it for this person. But yeah, I think people are pretty good about, and if, for example, the county answers and then Torrey's like, oh, I have another thing to add, then
yeah,
hop in.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And is Prosper staff monitoring the mute function for businesses? How are you?
Yeah, we'll monitor the mute function.
Okay.
So yeah, you don't need to worry about that.
Okay.
And then we can mute and unmute as needed.
Okay.
We're at 2 p.m. Did you want to check in with Emily before?
Emily, yes. Hi, Emily. So what about you? Are there key highlights that you want to raise?
I don't have anything prepared. My assumption was that I would kind of listen to the run and figure it out from there. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you're totally doing this on the fly, so.
I am, yeah.
Rolling with it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Anything else we need to address before we start admitting folks? I think that
we
we've
have
got all the
the pros on the call, the ones who've done several of these before, so probably don't need. Torrey, Rayhana, Jamie, you're set. Brian,
I am.
Amber, you guys, you're old pros. Okay.
All right, we'll go ahead and admit everyone. I'll probably, I'll be muted most of the time, but if anything happens, then I'll chime in, okay?
Thanks.
Yeah, so will I.
Wow. Hello, everyone. We'll get started momentarily. I just want to give folks a couple of minutes to finish logging into the. Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. I want to say hello from Business for a Better Portland. My name is Ashley Henry. I'm the director there. And also from our team today, we have Colin Crater, who's our membership director from BBPDX. He's been doing a lot of the outreach to folks in your sector to get participation in today's call. And I want to thank Prosper Portland staff for assembling us and giving us the opportunity to have this session today. We are going to be moving shortly to some presentations by several representatives from different government jurisdictions who are going to talk about the reopening as well as some of the health-related questions that you may have. And also some economic recovery questions that you may have. This part of the agenda is actually going to take almost a good 60 minutes because we have so many experts from different agencies and jurisdictions. And so we want to encourage you to be able to ask questions during that time by using the chat function. If you have a question that's specific to that particular panelist in the moment, by all means, recommend that you ask your question in the chat and we'll be monitoring that. If you have a more general question, we'll ask that you wait until the Q&A portion of the event. And without further ado, I just wanted to introduce Torrey Campbell, who is the Director of Economic Development at Prosper Portland. For those of you who don't know, Prosper is our city's economic development agency, and Torrey has been at the helm of this COVID recovery for a few months now. So Torrey, really good to see you again.
Great, Ashley. Thank you so much. It is really a pleasure to be able to be a part of this virtual conversation with all of you. Just wanted to take a few moments just to do an initial introduction and a greeting. And all of our economic response work since March, I believe 12th, when we initially moved into a stay-at-home posture as a city, we've prioritized populations that's really been disproportionately impacted by the current health kind of dynamic that we are in. So for us, that has meant really prioritizing Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. We know that within all of this, all industries, and yours has been no different, have been just dramatically devastated by the drop in sales, the disconnection. I have family members that are in this line of work, and they have done everything they could to take their physical workouts onto virtual line and trying to figure out, hey, you got 2 milk jugs at home. Those are 8 pounds each. I mean, it's just trying to figure out how to make all of this work. So to say that this is a bit of a phased approach, true, that's how we talk about it from a strategic approach. But the truth be told, this has really felt like a rolling nightmare for many businesses. And so we really wanted to carve out this space as we head into reopening, which has already taken place last week. But we know this is going to be an uphill recovery. To slow down enough to say from each industry, what are some of the major challenges that you're facing and how we could be supportive in that work as a city, collectively with all of our bureaus, and as also as a state. So I'm actually happy that on this call today, we have those different voices, both to listen. Some will also provide some updates, but I just want you to know as business owners, we recognize that you truly are the backbone of our economy and you make our city vibrant. And so this moment is incredibly important. The state of Oregon and Multnomah County, they define the public health requirements for reopening businesses, and the city wants to support businesses in the implementation of those requirements. And so again, today is a chance. We've done this with multiple industries. We've also focused on different culturally specific communities and businesses as well, just to make sure that what we are putting forth truly is the best strategy and something that we can continue to iterate as we understand that really the virus is dictating so much of our health and also our economic environment that we're in. But again, thank you for being on the call. We look forward to what we'll learn today and how that will help inform the process moving forward. So thank you.
Before we move on from you, Torrey, would you want to share just a little bit about the role that Prosper Portland has been playing more broadly? I know it's not specific to this sector, but since there are a lot of folks who may not be familiar with Prosper Portland, let them know about the role.
Yeah, so we are, in essence, the economic agency or the arm of the city. And so that has shown up in our early implementation, working in line with the mayor and the city commissioners to devise a strategy of how do we bolster communication as we entered into this moment that we're experiencing as a city, such as putting up a hotline for small businesses to quickly call early on when you guys are all scurrying to figure out what do I go, does PPP work for me, does it not? We also helped to set up what we call a small business relief fund, which early on was designed to help create opportunities for a kind of intermediate stopgap financing, both in terms of grants as well as loans. So the city ponied up $1 million, Prosper ponied up $1 million to provide those both grants and loans for businesses. We've also worked within different industries, again, to get a sense of what are the needs to help make those necessary business pivots. As we move into reopening, we're having these conversations, other things that we're working on. How do we make and create a distribution process that makes PPE more readily accessible for small businesses in the city? Those are going to become more normalized as a necessary in order for you to do your business well and safely and thoughtfully. So we really are right in the throes of trying to lead the charge, trying to be a good partner with the other bureaus and working with the state to support the small businesses that make up our city. So hopefully that helps give you a little bit more of a sense of what Prosper Portland, who we are, what we do, and the way in which we're trying to support you as small businesses.
Thanks, Torrey. Maybe if somebody from Prosper could put in the chat the link to all of the Prosper COVID resources, that might be a good resource for some folks who aren't already aware of it. Rehana Ansari is with the governor's office. She's with the regional solutions team, and she represents the regional area, the Portland metro region, and she has a few slides to present. Rehana?
Hi, Ashley. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ashley at Better Business for Portland, and to Torrey at Prosper Portland for hosting this listening session and for the opportunity to share a brief overview of the governor's reopening plan. But more importantly, I really look forward to hearing from those on the call about your thoughts, concerns, and your experiences on the ground. So the governor's framework for reopening is designed to be cautious and incremental. It's based on science and data. In Oregon, we've flattened the curve, but we know it's not without the many sacrifices that folks such as yourselves have made. The governor's top priority is ensuring the public health and safety of everyone. At the same time, we know that people are experiencing significant economic hardship, and the governor's reopening plan strives to achieve sort of that delicate balance between public health and the health of our economy. It consists of 3 phases and requires that prerequisites be met before a county or health region may advance into a phase. Next slide, please. This slide lists the governor's goals for reopening. You'll see things like minimize hospitalizations and deaths, allow people to safely return to work so they can support themselves and their families, avoid overwhelming healthcare systems, and protecting those at highest risk of severe illness, especially communities of color. I won't read off the remainder of the items, but you can see them listed here. Next slide, please. It's important to note that even as we reopen, life will look different. We'll be living with the virus until there's a reliable treatment or vaccine, which is a ways out. Until then, the primary tools that we have to fight the virus are actually pretty low tech and involve physical distancing and good personal hygiene. Every restriction that we lift will increase transmission and the number of cases. That's why it's important for us to reopen in a thoughtful and safe manner. Next slide, please. This graphic shows the types of activities and businesses that are allowed in each phase and the guidelines that exist for each of those industries in each phase. The left side represents guidelines that apply statewide in the baseline phase. The middle applies to counties in phase 1. Multnomah County is now in phase 1 as of last Friday. These are the activities that are allowed in phase 1, things like restaurants, bars, personal service providers, malls, gyms, and local gatherings of no more than 25 people with the need to maintain physical distance. The right side applies to counties in phase 2. After at least 21 days in phase 1, counties that continue to meet the prerequisites may be able to enter into phase 2. Things that are included in phase 2 include an expanded gathering size of up to 250 people, some office work, although telework is still strongly recommended, and some changes to restaurants and bars with a curfew of midnight. Phase 3 won't happen until there's a treatment or vaccine, which again is a ways out. Next slide. Given time constraints, I won't go over all of the sector-specific guidelines. Instead, here are some examples of the types of guidelines that exist for gyms and fitness-related organizations. Limit the capacity to a maximum of 250 people or the number of people, including staff, based on a determination of capacity. Limit class sizes, prohibit contact sports. For one-to-one personal training, maintain 6 feet of physical distance between the trainer and the client. If close contact is unavoidable, then it's recommended that the client wear a face covering. Close water fountains, close showers, keep saunas, steam rooms, and whirlpool spas closed. Keep pools closed to recreational swim activities, swim lessons, and all other aquatic activities. And keep drop-in childcare closed. So this is just an example of some of the guidelines for gyms and fitness. While industry sector guidelines vary, there are common themes throughout all involving physical distancing, increased cleaning and sanitization, the use of face coverings, and knowing symptoms. Next slide, please. Finally, you may find additional information and resources about the reopening and industry-specific sector guidelines on the Governor and Oregon Health Authority's web pages. And with that, I'll turn it over to our partners at Multnomah County. I'm happy to answer any questions afterward. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Jessica Guernsey. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I believe there's a slide deck.
Thanks, Jessica, for taking the wheel. I was stuck on
Oh,
mute.
sorry.
Oh, I appreciate it. No, it's great to have you. So thank you for going ahead. Prosper staff, is there a slide? Oh, there it is.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, great. Thank you. So hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Guernsey. I'm the Deputy Director of the Public Health Division at Multnomah County. Just wanted to say a couple opening remarks, and then we'll talk a little bit about the metrics related to reopening. First of all, I really want to thank you all as business owners. I know, as many people have mentioned, this has been an incredibly trying time for folks economically. Social cohesion and the impact on businesses cannot be underestimated. So I really appreciate all that you have been doing as part of one of the largest community responses I've ever seen to a public health crisis. You all have saved lives, so thank you. I personally am so missing my gyms. So I go to a couple gyms, I won't name them, but I will say that it really has become apparent to me how important going to the gym and just seeing familiar faces, and how important that kind of social cohesion is, even if you don't know a lot about folks. Exercising with people and having that as part of your community routine, it's really apparent how important that is to me personally. So I want to thank you all for that piece as well. We have other pandemics that are undergirding COVID-19 around chronic health conditions that have contributed to disparate impacts that we've seen across the community, and gyms are an important part of the overall public health response to obesity and chronic health conditions. So y'all are important players in that as well. I'm going to say a few things about our dashboard items, which are on the screen right now. As folks mentioned, we are in phase 1 as of last Friday. So Multnomah County had a slightly different assortment of dashboard measures that we worked on with the state that really relate largely to our ongoing commitment to racial equity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means in our metrics and sort of how that played out in terms of why it took us a while to get to reopening. But it goes without saying that we're seeing a couple pandemics. Oops, is that me? No, I don't think so. We're seeing a couple pandemics play out right now. One is, COVID-19, and then there's the underlying issues of systemic racial violence, which have surfaced both in terms of recent police killings, including George Floyd, but also we are very much seeing how it relates to our COVID-19 numbers. So we are seeing racial and ethnic disparities in terms of who is getting sick and how sick. So our metrics were very different for how we looked at reopening. So the first thing that I think folks have heard quite a bit about is the spread of COVID-19. Obviously, that's something that we were looking at very carefully, and it's one of the reasons we hit pause back, gosh, I can't remember when it was exactly. It's all blurring into one giant 3-month period. But several weeks ago, when not only Multnomah County, but other jurisdictions were looking at their numbers, we were seeing an increase in our numbers that were concerning, and we're continuing to see that rise. Part of that is expected because we are slowly re-entering life. May 15th, we entered baseline where we started to have increased activity as a community. So we knew that was going to happen. It's not a surprise, and we're increasing testing. So the combination of those things, where we are seeing more spread of COVID, and we will continue to see that. So the second piece is contact tracing. Folks, I'm sure have heard about this. This is a regular function of public health. Most people don't know what's happening because we're very, very cautious and careful about building trust with people who have what we would call a reportable disease, where we reach out to folks if they've been exposed or tested positive for a reportable disease, of which COVID is one. We figure out where a person has been, what kind of other potential exposures may have happened. We routinely do this with things like pertussis, tuberculosis. This is just a very enhanced response in COVID-19. This is much bigger than something we've ever undertaken. And this metric, we're still in progress on. We are quickly progressing to bringing on 120 plus new staff to support the contact tracing of people who are identified as having COVID-19. The next metric is, I hate this term, but it's what we call it, isolation facilities. Isolation facilities refer to our ability to separate and house folks that may not have a way to safely stay at home when they're sick. So say somebody lives in a group living situation, or they are houseless. We have established agreements with a variety of housing and hotel units in Multnomah County so that people can go somewhere to safely recover. So we had to establish that we had done that. Our testing capacity, not a lot to say there, except that we had to show that we would demonstrate a certain amount of testing capacity. For Multnomah County, we did spend some extra time ensuring that we could stand up community-based testing for marginalized communities, knowing that not everybody is going to go to or can go to a healthcare clinic. And then healthcare capacity as a region, Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington County, and I believe other counties as well, had to show that we had the ability to have a 20% surge in our healthcare needs. So if suddenly we had 20% more people, that needed intensive care or some sort of care related to COVID-19, we had to demonstrate that we had that on hand, which we did. One of the other metrics that we included for Multnomah County that's different than the rest of the state is that we also looked at, there is a metric related to hospitalization related to COVID-19 for the state, but we also looked at BIPOC communities. So we have a separate metric looking at BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities that we wanted to look carefully at, knowing our racial and ethnic disparities. So again, proportionality matters. Our numbers are small, but if we see large numbers of BIPOC communities becoming hospitalized, that is where we're pausing to look at what our response is to make sure that it's proportionate in those communities. And then personal protective equipment, which I know a lot of people have questions about. We had to show that we had on hand a certain amount and supply of personal protective equipment for healthcare workers, emergency service providers. And then in Multnomah County, we added a layer of showing that we could actually help critical community and social service providers obtain PPE, because they're such an important part of our safety net system. We know that folks need to be open to serve families, especially right now, as folks have been really struggling. So that was an additional metric that we added on. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we applied on June 5th. We did not get approved the first time that we, the Friday, June 12th, that we thought we were going to be approved, which was, I think, smart. We're all, what we care about is, life and safety and health. And so the governor made an assortment of different decisions about proceeding. So I think that pause was good for us to really take into consideration how we wanted to proceed. And now our application for phase 2 will actually be regional. Multnomah County will not apply as a single county. We will apply with Clackamas and Washington County as a metro area. I mean, I think you all know counties are sort of artificial in that people live, work, play, pray in all different parts of the county. So, we started to see that in our disease transmission. So moving forward, our application will be regional, as will another area of the state. And we will not move into phase 2 any sooner than 3 weeks from last Friday, which I believe is about July 12th. Rihanna, did I miss anything on that piece from the state perspective about the regional application?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. So just to go over a few of the basics, and then Jeff, feel free to jump in. What we know right now is, like I said, we're seeing more exposures, more potential for exposures and case increases. And that is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of, people getting back together. The patterns that we've seen thus far have to do a lot with group gatherings, returning to work, and just enlarging sort of our social network and where people are having contact, even as small groups. Our director, Rachel Banks, has this great saying, I think we often think of, and it's good to be careful at the grocery store and at a store, or, when you're out, just being safe. But then I think sometimes we let our guard down around reintroducing friends and family into our lives, thinking that, maybe we don't need a face covering, or we can be a little bit more casual, but we're seeing that show up in our numbers. So it's important to think about the people that you know as well, and slowly introduce those kinds of interactions. So that's an important part of prevention. Next slide. And then just, we're continuing with the basics, and Jeff and others can talk about the specifics related to gyms and fitness centers. But this stuff, I think y'all probably know pretty well by now. We're really focusing on keeping folks 6 feet apart as much as possible. Very important to have employees and or customers that are sick stay home. High cleaning and sanitizing high touch surface areas often. And this Wednesday, we will move into a new phase of the face covering / mask requirements, where employees and the public are going to need to wear face coverings. Next slide. I think that might be it. Oh, we did this nice new visual. Yes, so beginning next week, you'll see, actually beginning today in Multnomah County, we're doing a lot of messaging around face covering and masks. So many jurisdictions have moved to having this be a mandate. It is one of the things that we have that can help reduce our risk. We're in what I like to call a harm reduction situation. We can't completely eliminate the risk of COVID-19 spreading, but we can drastically reduce the risk. And this is one of the means that we will do that with.
Thanks, Jessica.
Sure.
I know there are a lot of questions already in the chat, but I actually think that Jeff's presentation is probably going to answer a number of them. Jeff, would you be able to let us know about your role at the county? And I don't believe you have slides, but you may have some responses that are quite relevant to the questions in the chat.
Yeah, no, thanks. I don't have a slide presentation, so I'll just try to answer some of the questions I saw that are coming up on the screen as we were going. Just to make sure everyone knows that the guidelines that we are using are basically they're working documents. We're finding out new information about the virus every week, and we're only getting that information from case investigations and seeing trends. And so those guidelines, they're not set in stone. They're constantly being reworked. We have to monitor them ourselves to see every week, did something get added or deleted, or is there new guidance, best practices to be added? So please keep an eye on those as we move forward, because we're learning new things about the virus every time. I think there was a question about we entered into phase 1. Is there potential for going back to baseline? We've seen this happen in other counties. Well, only one in Union County on the east side of Oregon, where it went into phase 2, and then it voluntarily went back into phase 1 for reopening. So it has happened, and that was largely due to a large outbreak that occurred at a facility over there. Also beware that there are wonderful FAQs that give you a lot of specifics of what you can and can't do with the guidelines. My day job is really, doing the licensing and the inspecting of the restaurants, the pools and spas, hotel, motels. And, we bleed a little bit over into gyms that may have a pool or a spa or a childcare facility, but not all the way over there. And so again, there are some FAQs that, you can basically use as best practice of how you can operate safely. And I think that's all I saw really quickly, going over the chats, if there was something else that needs to be called out.
Thanks, Jeff. I think I'll read a few of the questions from the top, because I think that a lot of folks have these questions. Could you talk about what requirements there would be if any staff or clients tested positive for COVID? They're wondering if this is a hot yoga studio, and they're wondering if they would be required to shut down for a period of time.
So again, I'll stress this again of making sure that I know there's a specific question, but making sure that all you people that are coming to your facilities are, healthy. Have your 6 foot social distance, physical distancing, and washing your hands as much as possible. If someone does test positive and that had attended one of your facilities and was working out there, again, what would happen with the case investigators would contact your facility. Well, actually, at first they would start off with the person who became ill and get as much information as possible about where did they actually attend, where did they go out, who were they interacting with, what symptoms did they have? And then they would go back and they would do that case investigation and contacting all the facilities that they actually attended to and find out, what actually safe precautions that you have in place there. It's really hard for me to say, would you be required to shut down? I'll give you for an example of, we do have some restaurants where someone has tested positive for COVID, but that it would not require the facility to shut down. Basically, they did temporarily pause, did an extra thorough cleaning. They already had great practices already with, hand washing all the time, glove use, and had face coverings on. So the risk of someone spreading it would be much lower.
Thanks, Jeff. This is a group of folks who getting the heart rate up a lot. So I'm wondering about what about really strenuous exercise? Are instructors required to wear a mask when teaching?
I saw that question too, and I went back and I can't find anything that allows instructors to have no face coverings on. What they can do is use a face shield. Again, it's a little bit more, it may allow a little bit more air to come and go off your face, but again, it's not ideal. But again, the most important thing to do is you may have to modify the routine for your instructors as well too, to make sure that they're safe. So while they're, leading an exercise, they can also protect all the clients that have attended there. So it may require some modification, but at this point, there's none of the phases identify an opportunity for instructors to remove their face coverings.
Thanks.
Again, as well as if they have an ADA issue or medical issue.
Another question along the same lines is around the childcare programs that are often in workout facilities while parents are in class. Do you know what defines drop-in childcare in this particular instance? Or who might be able to answer that?
I honestly don't. It would be, if you have a facility that's licensed by the Office of Childcare, then that would probably be a facility that would be allowed to operate. I don't know if the drop-in facilities have license or Office of Childcare licenses. If not, you could definitely contact the Office of Childcare and find out, do they meet the definition of a drop-in, or is there something else they could have in place?
Yeah, and is the Office of Childcare a county office?
It's actually with the state of Oregon. It's a part of the Oregon Department of Education, and Rihanna can speak to that more if she needs to.
Rihanna?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I would say a drop-in childcare is probably a small childcare facility that your gym or fitness organization may have for limited duration, while a parent completes their exercise. It would be different from, for example, if you were to offer day camps for children, in which case you would need to refer to the guidance for school-age summertime day camps. But a drop-in childcare is not sort of full-day regular childcare.
Thanks, Rihanna. What about, I think that we might want to move on to our other speakers so that they have a chance to make remarks. And I think that we'll end up covering a lot of the questions that are in the chat, but we will have plenty of time at the end. I want to acknowledge some city staffers who are on the call today. And we'll start with Jamie Dunphy from the mayor's office. Jamie.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for inviting me on here. I am with the mayor's office. I'm senior policy director for Mayor Ted Wheeler. I actually met many of you, or some of you I recognize on the call from when I was a senior policy director for our now late Commissioner Nick Fish. I'm here specifically to try and hear about what your elected officials at City Council need to hear about your industry as we are reopening. We have been allocated dollars directly by the federal government, and we have the need and the demand on those dollars is obviously much greater than the supply. And so we're trying to figure out what is the unique role of the city of Portland versus what the county is doing with the health bonus, versus what the state is doing. and the governor, what is the unique role of the city of Portland to play, and what will your businesses need, and what do your elected officials need to know in order to help make sure your reopening is successful? So that's my job here. I don't have a whole lot else to say. I'm mostly just listening and taking diligent notes. So thank you guys all for spending the time to be here today.
Thanks, Jamie. From Portland Parks and Rec, we have Sean and Terry. Sean Rogers and Terry Davis.
I'll let my colleague Terry start us off.
Okay. Hi, I'm Terry Davis. In my actual life, I'm the manager of our community centers for Portland Parks and Recreation, and oversee their daily operation and programming. Currently, I'm also with my peer, Sean. We're both part of a team that is looking at reopening our programs, assets, buildings, and so on for Portland Parks and Recreation under COVID-19 guidelines and requirements. And we're each taking on different pieces of it. Sean can talk to you about what you're probably most interested in, and that would be permitting out spaces within our parks. My focus within this project is primarily on the reopening of our parks assets, our parks recreation facilities, including our community centers, our tennis center, our sports facilities, our pools, our community schools, all those buildings that we usually program in, as well as providing some outdoor fitness, particularly group exercise fitness programs in our parks through the summertime this year. Our facilities, for the most part, with the exception of the Portland Tennis Centers, all of our recreation facilities will be remaining closed until September, and that includes our pools, our outdoor pools as well as our indoor pools. We will, and our fountains and splash pads will all remain closed for the summer. We are trying to we're working on a comprehensive plan for safely reopening our facilities and providing adaptive programs that meet the guidelines for physical distancing and COVID management at all of our facilities. In our outdoor focus, we are hoping to start re-energizing and welcoming back particularly those folks that participate in our programs through a membership pass capability, or membership pass they purchase, by bringing them out into the parks, into parks that are near to our 5 regional centers, and offering a slate of group exercise classes that they can participate in throughout the summer, in small blocks of classes at each park, maybe 3-4 a day, and on an 8-week program. So that's primarily what I'm working on right now. Sean is focusing on the management and permitting of all of our outdoor areas. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Yeah, we, like everybody, is trying to keep up with the ever-changing details that come in, which makes it challenging for us to turn around and issue permits. Currently in phase 1, we just opened up a laundry list of wedding couples anxious to see that their weddings actually get to follow through. Open picnics and in a few of our parks, limiting the size of the locations just simply to help reduce the number of people that we actually have in our parks at any one time. We have camps that are starting with a focus on fitness. Obviously, there's a number of competitive sports that would love to be playing, but since those are not currently allowed, we are working with them to create fitness as a focus, skill-based activities, and looking forward to those increasing later, hopefully in phase 2. We have some commercial work that we're doing on a limited basis. Some of our food vendors, we have rental supply commercial vendors who are hoping to get started with everything from canoes and kayaks and the like on the river. So we are working really hard, keeping a very close eye in collaboration with the county and with working in tandem with Oregon Parks and Recreation, as well as OHA and the state. And that is my presentation with 16 seconds left to go in the 4 minutes.
Thank you, Sean. We are running a little bit behind, and I appreciate Amber being here today from PBOT to talk about open streets. I was wondering, Amber, if you would mind us jumping ahead to our industry panelists today so that we can get very, very specific to their questions first, and then have your open streets presentation a little bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could just maybe a 30-second intro, and I think then we can save anything to the end. So just in case people haven't heard about it, the Portland Bureau of Transportation with the City of Portland has initiated a healthy business permit program for people that are interested in using the sidewalk, the streets, the parking lanes for use of their business in the right-of-way. It's free. It's good through November 1st. And we're really trying to make people aware that, you know, as physical space is what's limited here, the right-of-way can offer that space for you. So we are figuring different ways to support people, either again with the sidewalk or with a side street plaza or even a main street plaza. So I think depending on where you're located in the city, there may be, we have a map that's available online that could show you where some of these are starting to pop up already. And if you're in an area that already has sort of like a density of businesses or restaurants, there might be existing applications in the works. So I would encourage you to work with your local business district. If you have one, to look at maybe a collaborative approach. Maybe there's exercise classes in the morning in this reserve space that could transition into more of a restaurant use in the afternoon and evening. So I will leave that at that. There's a web page with a lot of information. Oh, thank you, Colin. That has some information on it. The web link is there in the chat, and I'll go ahead and take myself off so that there's more room for panelists and questions. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. And I apologize, my dog either wants in or out and in all at the same time. So I'm gonna have to keep going back and forth. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to E.B. Fertig with Unfold Yoga, who's gonna share some questions and concerns with us and hopefully get some responses from the panelists.
Hi, my name is E.B. And I wanted to get right to what our concern is. We're a small yoga studio, and we pay about $4,200 a month in rent. And a lot of our people are sensitive in one way and another. So they're definitely not all clambering to come back into the studio. And even if they did, we can have maximum of 6 people at a time, given the space of our rooms. So long story short, we need to know how to get out of our lease. We've been in contact with our landlord from the very beginning. We've been scrimping and saving and paying our rent the whole time. But our landlord also has a mortgage, which he has to pay. And ultimately, like, that just needs to be over. That lease needs to be over so that we can have the flexibility to keep offering our classes to people online at a competitive rate. Right now, they're doing the best to pay at the regular rate, which includes the rent of our studio. But that can't keep going on. We need to be able to be competitive. And then also, once people can go into public spaces, have the flexibility to drop into spaces and use them as we need. So that's our main thing, is that we need to get out of our lease, and we need to figure out, like, what are the I do know that the how to talk about that, but are there some ways that agencies can come in and support or leverage relationships with banks so that there's more flexibility here? The second issue is with regard to parks. You talked about some of the activities, but I didn't hear about what the cost will be to reserve space for classes, for exercise classes, and if there's any way to not pay that if it, for example, rains. Those are my big issue and my little issue, and that's it.
Thanks, EB. I was wondering if there are any agency reps who want to take the question about working with landlords. I know that the Prosper Portland website already has some great tips about how to navigate those conversations. I'm curious if there are any upcoming policy solutions to that. I have put in the chat a post from the BBPDX switchboard about an effort by another coalition called United for Relief. That is a group of landlords and tenants working together to ask for a foreclosure moratorium that would give those landlords some relief, because EB, as you know, your landlord still has to pay his or her bank, and in the absence of some relief for that landlord, that person's going to still need you to pay. So I encourage folks to read up about that option. It's very pertinent to this week. Is there somebody, Rayhana or anyone, who could take that?
Thank you, Evie and Ashley. I can just say that the governor has convened a special session that will start this Wednesday. And I know that commercial and residential eviction moratoriums will be addressed, as well as foreclosures. Unfortunately, I don't have the draft bill language, but it probably is available on OLIS. Ashley, I can see if I can find those draft bills and send them to you.
I can share the, oops. I thought I had the link, but I can get it momentarily and put it in the chat to the draft, yeah.
Draft legislation. So hopefully that will be addressed here, you know, before July 1, when a lot of rent and payments are due. And then I don't know if Prosper Portland, if Torrey or anyone else has anything to say about what the city's been working on. I know that the city has been doing a lot in this space.
Torrey or somebody from Prosper, would it be possible for you to weigh in? I also saw that there was a Prosper Portland webinar about that. I'm wondering if Prosper staff would be able to link to that in the chat. Oh, there you are, Torrey.
Sorry about that.
That's
yeah, I was having some technical difficulties. Can you just repeat the question around it?
Sure. We're talking about the need for commercial tenants to be able to negotiate with their landlords and to actually get out of their lease entirely in light of how the business model has changed so significantly.
Yes. Yeah, so I can share what work we've been doing, but more importantly, what you need to know is, like, how do you access, what's the next step? So we have a task force that's been dedicated toward this, that's been driven by the mayor's direction among a number of areas of business supports, to the point already made, Ashley, just around the tremendous pivoting that everyone's having to do. I'm happy to drop into the chat what information we have now, and we can also follow up too with a more thoughtful response on, are there additional ways that you can go about navigating these conversations with your property owners. So stay tuned for that. I will see what we can pull up right now, already made available in the chat, but this is definitely something, again, in this listening conversation that will help inform the work we need to do moving ahead to help you navigate these types of conversations.
Torrey, I'm curious, given the consistency of feedback that Prosper is hearing from tenants about these concerns, is that then able to elevate up to the city and be part of the city's advocacy agenda in Salem, since that's happening this week? I don't know the status of those discussions.
Yeah, I don't know the exact, if that is a component of it, but I know that it has been raised multiple occasions. And so I know, to your point, Ashley, we do have kind of a legislative bundle of ask, and I know that this has been a part of that conversation of how do we provide relief for tenants when it comes to leases and negotiations, knowing that you need to have a much larger conversation at a statewide level. So that those have floated up and potentially are part of that overall package that we're advocating for from a legislative level.
Okay, thanks. And did the folks from the parks have an answer for EB regarding her parks question?
Absolutely. We do, this is Sean. We do commercial yoga in our parks all the time. It's a permit. You can do it hourly. You can do it multiple hours. You can do it multiple times a week, weekly. It of course is Oregon and means you're going to deal with the weather, but it is certainly possible. We do yoga all the time. So it's definitely something that we can assist with.
Thanks very much. And could you maybe put in the chat the links to information about how people can get more information about those and how much the permits cost?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. I want to be sure to acknowledge the other speakers who are here, and I want to give Devlin from Vitalidad Movement Center an opportunity to ask her questions. Did I pronounce that right, Devlin?
Yeah, it's good. We go by VMAC for short, so Vitalidad Movement Arts Center, VMAC. We're a fitness, dance, and event center, so unfortunately COVID has absolutely decimated our business on both revenue streams that we operate in. And similar to EB, our rent is outrageous. We're close to $15,000 a month, and right now all of that is due because there's no forgiveness for our landlords who own the building or are leasing those on a mortgage. So definitely looking forward to the support from the city and anything that Prosper Portland can provide. But we are gonna continue opening right now, and I had a few questions. One that is about the masks. So the language that I read and I think was posted in the chat is that we do not have to mask if we are able to maintain 6 feet of social distancing inside of our studio. So for example, at my location, we have 7 by 7 foot squares taped on the floor, plus a 2-foot walkway in between each of those squares. So we are requiring our students to wear masks upon arrival and instructors. And then once they enter their square, then they can take their mask off for the dance class or the fitness class. And I just wanted to make sure that that is okay. And I also had a question about occupancy signs. So we're required to post occupancy signs right now. But for example, this morning I went to a gym that I used to go to all the time, and it said their stated occupancy is 405 people. But that's, I'm assuming, for their whole building, and I thought it was 215 less. So my main question for that is the occupancy based on the room size? And if so, is there a link to a place that we can go and verify that information? And then finally, I wanted to touch on support from the city. So we received a box of 25 disposable masks and some hand sanitizer, which we're super thankful for. But we had to buy contactless hand, how do you call those, sanitation machines. We had to invest in a bunch of cleaning supplies in order to accommodate all of the extra cleaning that we're doing. And we had to turn off our water fountain, which we really were excited to be able to offer a water fountain for our guests who don't want to always purchase a water bottle. So is there a program for rebates on purchasing those large amount of cleaning supplies or installing like a touchless water station, touchless refill water bottle station from the city? That was pretty much all of my questions that I have right now.
Wondering if the staff from the county could start. Jeff, would you be able to answer some of the health related questions?
Sure, I'll chime in, and Rihanna or Jessica, please jump in and correct me if I misspeak. For the face coverings, it's still required for the teachers, whether there is a 6 foot physical distancing or not. They always have to have that. It does mention in one of the guidelines that you can have it off, but that's you don't have to wear a face covering, but that's only for customers and visitors that are doing the physical activity. It does speak again to, you know, that staff can, let's see, when they pull it up, they can't, if they're not interacting with the public, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say, or OSHA would say that if you're in the same room, you are interacting with the public. They've only only time that the state has said that you're not interacting is if you're in a different room than the public, and that's when you can remove your masks. That's what we've been told in previous interactions. Brianna, do you want to correct me?
Thank you, Jeff. No, that's my understanding. So under the new updated face covering guidance, all employees, in this case, including fitness instructors, would be required to wear a face covering. It doesn't necessarily need to be a mask, but it could be a face shield. The only exemptions that exist are for customers and visitors. You know, when, if for example, someone were to have a medical related illness that would prevent them from wearing a mask, or if you were a restaurant business and people were eating or drinking in your establishment. Or there is an exemption for strenuous physical exercise, but that again is for customers and visitors to have the exemption. It doesn't exempt the instructor.
Can you answer why? Like, why do the instructors have to suffer? Like, that's really difficult to teach a fitness class or a dance class with a face shield or a mask on.
I know that, you know, face coverings are a very effective way to help control the transmission of the virus. And if you're an employee and you're in, you know, teaching a number of different people throughout the day, I think it's just important to not only protect yourself, but to protect students and patrons. But I can definitely point out this one exemption. I can say, you know, there's an exemption for customers and visitors who are engaging in strenuous physical exercise, but not necessarily for the fitness instructor. So I can certainly relay that feedback. But as of right now, the requirement is that they do wear a face covering.
And there are exemptions outright to, you know, if someone does suffer from asthma or some other ailment, then they can't wear a face covering out there. And again, it's a policy that your organization would have to meet. So it does speak to, you know, health conditions and how you can, you know, use that for an employee if they have that health condition and they need to not wear a face covering.
Devlin, you also asked a question about PPE. Rehana, would you be able to talk about the e-boards, the $10 million that was allocated for small business PPE and how small businesses could go about applying for that?
Sure. So the Legislative Emergency Board just a couple of weeks ago allocated $10 million statewide for personal protective equipment. And the governor's Coronavirus Economic Advisory Council is reviewing how best to allocate those funds or how to distribute those funds and under what criteria who would receive priority. I will also share that Business Oregon has a PPE supply connector listed on their website, and if Brian Guiney's on the line, maybe he can include the link in the chat. But it's a third-party vendor list that companies can access through Business Oregon's website for information on different vendors who supply personal protective equipment for purchase.
And then what about additional support from other agencies? Torrey, can you speak to that, or anybody else from the city?
Yeah, at this point, with respects to PPE, we piloted a program recognizing that these products are really hard for a lot of businesses to access. Our hopes is to be able to scale it with additional funding to make it more readily available for businesses as they move towards reopening. So I would definitely say stay tuned as we source through that over the next few weeks.
And then Devlin, your third question was about possible subsidies for installing contactless water bottles, I believe.
Water bottle refillers and also like contactless sanitizer stations.
Great.
I think that the sanitizer stations, for example, it's possible that that could be considered for the personal protective equipment pot of funding. So that's certainly feedback that I can share with the governor's coronavirus economic advisory council, that folks are interested in making sure that those monies are available for hand sanitizer as well as things like face coverings.
Thanks, Johanna. Emily Corso, are you feeling ready to perhaps ask some questions now? Tell us about your studio.
Yeah, I definitely have some questions. Yes, so I run Bold and Badass Fitness. We're a sort of a boot camp style gym, and then we also do what's called semi-private personal training, which is like small group personal training. We are currently closed, but just about to reopen as well. So let's see. I have some questions. Let me try to be brief, but stop me if it's too many, please. First off, I'm concerned about what it will look like for us if things shut down again. I understand that you probably can't say as to whether or not that will happen. But in particular, you know, what options are available to me or to any of us? If we're closed again, can I train people one-on-one? Can I train them in their homes? Can I train a single client in my studio? I have about 1,000 square feet of my training floor. Can I train one person in there? I have property. We have a yard that's part of the business's property. Can we train outside in a non-public space? If there's a shelter-in-place order, you know, kind of things like that. How will the guidelines apply in those circumstances? Or are there any ways that a next run of shelter-in-place could look different? Let's see, some other questions. So that's kind of around if that happens. What's my liability if a member tests positive? And in particular, are there any activities that I could do or decisions that we could make that would increase our liability? So like whether or not we strictly require members wear masks, given that it's optional, or if I train members who are essential workers or healthcare, things like that. Other stuff is a little more detailed logistical. So maybe if the first two leave time, I could ask those as well. Does that sound okay? Cool.
Yeah. I guess I'll start. Thank you for the excellent questions. Should we move back a phase, or should your business need to close? I know that the current guidelines for gyms and fitness related organizations does say consider holding fitness activities or classes outdoors if it can be done safely when it does not violate any local ordinances. So that's, you know, may be one possible alternative. However, I think it would depend on the situation that arises and what the governor's executive order were to say. You know, if it were to say, you know, no groups of 10 or more people, then you would have to take that into account. And I can't anticipate what those circumstances or guidelines would be, unfortunately. And then your second question, it was liability, related to liability. Unfortunately, because this is all sort of a new space, it's something that you should probably connect with legal counsel on. But I would recommend that you adhere to the guidance that's been put out by the state. And it's possible that the legislature or the federal government may address sort of issues of liability in the future. But in the meantime, we are suggesting that businesses consult with their legal counsel and with their insurance agents.
Thank you. All right, let's see what else. So as far as some of the requirements for reopening, so one requirement, for instance, was that the showers be closed. Does this mean that we cannot literally have people shower on site, or that we can't have people in locker rooms or gathering? Obviously, we want to limit that, but like, are we allowed to have locker rooms at all lobby space, etc. I'll just batch up a few more here. If I have a subtenant in another industry, does their occupancy affect my occupancy if they're in a different room in the same building? As long as we're under, obviously in a large building, the building's occupancy might be in the hundreds, as someone else mentioned, but for any given space, do we have to worry about their tenants, whether or not their people, or not tenants, their clients test positive, things like that? How will the guidelines affect me if I have a subtenant that has an incident?
Okay, so your first question, showers must be closed for use, but locker rooms, sinks, and toilets may remain open for use, but with the limited number of people at any given time to ensure that the physical distancing of at least 6 feet between people can be maintained. And then if you have a subtenant, so long as that subtenant isn't occupying the same physical space at the same time as you, the occupancy number would not be calculated as part of yours. So if they were in a different room, they could have, they would be subject to their own occupancy requirement. But that said, there should be no commingling of patrons in any public spaces, hallways, for example, where the two groups may collide.
Thank you.
Were there any other outstanding questions for you, Emily? I know we have quite a few in the chat that I want to make sure that we get to. That may have not been answered.
I don't have anything else. I'm interested to hear about the chat stuff, and I will just throw out what the others said to echo what I know you're already hearing, which is that my biggest concern is really my lease and having options for that. So I know we're all excited to find out how this will play out in that regard. But thank you.
Thank you.
One question I found to be really interesting was the distinction between a public business and the concept of a members only scenario. Can you speak to whether or not that would change the requirements?
Yes, so it would not change the requirements. A public gym and a private gym would be subject to the same guidelines.
Thank you. And then the guidelines, as we've discussed a number of times already, the guidelines do reference certain exemptions. How is it, what's the process that a business would go through to determine whether or not the exemption would apply in a particular case? Is there a process or a particular agency that determines that for them?
No, I think a business would need to review the guidelines and determine for themselves if there were certain, if you're talking about face coverings, for example, who would be exempt. I think it's pretty clear in the guidelines that it's things like, if you're a restaurant, folks that are for eating or drinking don't have to wear face coverings at that moment in time. Or if someone has a medical condition and they share with you that they have asthma and are unable to wear a face covering, for example. And that said, there are enforcement mechanisms in place. Oregon OSHA is the primary enforcement agency for the state of Oregon. They're taking more of an educational approach to all of this in recognition that this is all new information. But if there are sort of repeat offenders or bad actors, they could levy potentially some fines or, revoke business licenses. And so, I would just recommend that businesses, refer to the guidelines that are available on the Governor and Oregon Health Authority's websites. And, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I will put my email address in the chat. But I would, recommend that you adhere to the guidelines that are put forth.
Thanks, Rehana. And I saw that you had answered that later in the chat. Sorry, I'm just still going through the long list here. But it's helpful to have that additional detail. I think one question was about the requirement of posting occupancy signs. Do people feel that that question got sufficiently answered, or is no? Okay. Anybody able to answer the question about occupancy?
I believe that goes for the entire building. It's not cut up to classes of having it. Rihanna, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's for the entire organization is the limited to 250.
That's correct.
So in the case of VMAC, Devlin, can you speak about how that would affect you, and if there's any gray area there that you need clarification on?
Well, like we have our giant building, but then in our building we have rooms. So I guess for us to post occupancy, do we need to post occupancy for the entire building, or per room that the dance class or fitness class is occurring within?
Do you share a common entrance?
We're the only tenant inside the building, so all of our guests enter the lobby. We have our class time staggered, so there's not 100 people coming into the lobby at once. And we are limiting the amount of people taking each class to maintain 9 feet of distance between each person, but we don't know which occupancy to post for the requirements.
I believe it's again for the entire building. So if they all enter into one entrance and then they disperse to the rooms, that 250 would be for the all those rooms together.
Okay, and it is there's a question in the chat. It is required to post signage, correct?
Rihanna, do you know if that posting signage is required for the occupancy?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at the guidance right now to see if I can find that. I don't see that requirement. I see, the requirement to post clear signs about, the different COVID symptoms and the need to ask employees and clients to stay home if they're exhibiting those symptoms. I also see the requirement to use signs to encourage physical distancing throughout the facility, including but not limited to the reception areas, eating areas, locker rooms, and near popular equipment. And then staff are required to sort of monitor the physical distancing.
And it looks like that sign about saying, maximum occupancy it says that you all are supposed to determine it, and you don't need to, it doesn't look like you have to post it. It just looks like you have to determine it.
And the occupancy is, it's either limiting the gathering capacity to a maximum of 250 people, so long as those individuals are physically distanced, or the number of people, including staff, based on a determination of capacity, which is the square footage per person. And I think it's about 35 square feet roughly per person, but no more than 250.
I see that John from Multnomah County also posted in the chat a link to a flyer put out by OSHA, which I think is a good resource. I recently learned that OSHA is providing these kinds of consultations. So you might want to take them up on that, Devlin. Kay, did that finally answer the question when they answer this, it's not required to post the signage? That you
about occupancy.
Yeah. About occupancy, sorry, right, exactly.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering where I can find a list of which signs are required, so we know what to prepare.
Sure. I will include a link to the fitness guidelines in the chat, and you can find the requirements there. I will also include links to the governor's website and the Oregon Health Authority's website, where you can find more information on all of the industry sector guidelines and the reopening framework.
And then also, Ashley, we need to move on. Prosper Portland, we've put it in the link already, but there's also a page that we've created that is helping complement the work of both state and county with respects to signage as a way to help boost just customer confidence as they step into your space and places of business. And so we have it in a variety of languages. It's all printable, either for social media, Instagram, Twitter, or you can also print out posters. And it just has really thoughtful, really concrete and simple descriptions, like we're looking forward to seeing you. We're happy to serve you, a party of 10 or fewer. We encourage all of our, our staff to stay home. And so if they're feeling sick. And so the goal of this is to be able to showcase this throughout the city with many businesses using this kind of marketing or branding just to boost customer confidence. So again, see this as a way to complement the work that you're already doing, as well as many of the resources that have already been called out that you should be able to view. So we're happy to drop that in the link, and I think you would find that to be helpful. And also in particular with gyms and yoga studios, if there's information here that you would love to be able to see in this kind of format or signage to speak more directly to your business and industry, let us know. And there's a chance we can also accommodate that and incorporate a few of those thoughtful signages for you to post as well.
Thanks, Torrey. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'm doing my best to skim through all of the questions to make sure that we are getting them all answered. I do recall one about 5 minutes ago about the safety of holding hot yoga classes. Since saunas and spas are required to be closed, is it fair to assume that they should just have unheated classes? I'm really longing for the day from my great hot yoga classes in the winter time, but what do you think, Rihanna?
I don't see anything in the guidelines that explicitly call out or ban hot yoga. So I can only go off what I have in the guidelines. I don't know if public health has any comments that they would, local public health, Jessica or others, have anything that they would like to share about that?
Jeff, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm just wondering if from your perspective, I mean, I'm trying to think of the transmission issues that would be elevated with hot yoga.
Yeah, as someone that's only done hot yoga a couple times, and it's been a long time ago, so I don't like hot weather as much. It's really, it's really the humidity that's really kind of, it's an aerosolized virus. And so when you have it, I'm thinking also, with pools and situations where you have a lot more humidity in there, and hot yoga is more of a drier heat usually, but you're also sweating more. I don't know at this point about hot yoga. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would, I think the face coverings are going to be important.
Yeah, then, there's finding more and more, that how it spreads in confined rooms. They've had the research showing that, the air conditioning units are starting to help spread it in some circumstances if you don't increase airflow, through the natural. So, they're even finding, the humidity will sometimes keep it aloft in the air a little bit longer than it needs to be. So it's a little all over the place right now. And that's why the guidelines are a working document, and, they're just they're updating them as they find new best science on it.
Thanks, Jeff. And I just wanted to acknowledge, I understand that hot yoga is different from saunas and steam rooms. I was just drawing on that analogy. Someone else asked about the face covering requirement for instructors if they're actually behind a plexiglass barrier. Would that eliminate the need for the mask as an instructor?
That's a good question. There's nothing in the guidance that really addresses that right now. So I'm gonna inquire about the fitness instructors, and if there's an exemption for them, similar to customers and patrons, or if they have adequate physical distancing or plexiglass barrier. So I will inquire about that specific point, and I will get back to you, Ashley, and then if you could share that information with folks.
Actually, Prosper Portland has the registration list from this session today, and so it might be better for Amy to.
Yeah, we can share any follow-up information out with the participants.
Okay, so I will follow up with you.
Thanks, Rihanna. All right, what about the use of fans in class in light of the circulation of air issue, Jeff?
Yeah, fans, fresh air, change your filters as much as possible. All have shown to have a great positive, or great for the atmosphere and to help lessen the spread of COVID.
Mm-hmm. I'm seeing that some people are a little unsettled about this. So I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity to get back to these folks pretty quickly, because some of them are already operating, and it's actually a fairly big industry in Portland. So it might be a good idea for us to get back to them as soon as we can, if that's possible.
And I'm sorry, and what point in particular, Ashley? Just hot yoga in general, or?
Yeah, I think there's just a question about, to what degree does it, where is the line between regular yoga and hot yoga and the concern about spread as a result of the increased respiration, increased heart rate, and the heat in the room, the humidity that Jeff pointed out.
Okay, I will inquire about that. As of right now, the guidance does not exclude hot yoga, but I will definitely inquire about it.
Okay. I'm feeling like less of a slacker. It's a good thing that I have that hot yoga experience in my background, even though I've been not going for a long time. So, okay. All right. So other questions? Along with changing air filters and circulating air, is there any evidence on air purifying machines to help with reduce spread, sorry?
Not that I've seen. Yeah, not that I've seen, sorry.
I know there's some like high grade HEPA filters that people use in their home or in medical environments. John, did you turn your screen on because you have an answer to that question?
I don't know if I have an answer to it, but I would just suggest people do some research before diving into an air purifying system. Some of the ones like that are ionizing can actually increase indoor air pollution significantly by producing ozone, which is harmful for people to breathe. I'll look right now to see if I can find a link to a Wirecutter article that has a pretty good list of filters, but I have to admit that all my research about this has been in the realm of particulate matter as opposed to viral particles. So I don't have a great answer. I know it's effective at reducing particulate matter. I'm not sure about the viral particles. It probably depends on their size, quite honestly. I don't know enough about that.
All right, well, we are wrapping up. We've got about 5 minutes left. So I wanted to ask if the Prosper Portland team would be able to compile the links that were shared in the chat so that they can be sent out to all the registrants in case people, sometimes it's hard to cut and paste from Zoom chats for some reason. So maybe that would be a good follow-up. And anybody from the Prosper team, could you speak to the kinds of ongoing dialogues that you're having with the participants from the breakout sessions or the listening sessions? Sorry.
Sure. So again, we really want to express our appreciation for you taking the time to be on the call. We realize that it's very difficult what you're dealing with. And unfortunately, you're not hearing the crisp, succinct, concise answers that help you be able to make those important decisions. But we also realize this is a unique moment that we're in. So even the questions that you're giving us feels like you're stumping us. That's what we want to hear so that we can pivot and make the appropriate decisions quickly. That being said, we're taking all the information. This conversation has been recorded. And so also everything that's been put in the chats, both questions, feedback, and links will also be captured. And we're also going to follow up with an additional survey that just allows you, particularly those who've been silent or maybe have not had the opportunity via chat, to express some of your thoughts as another way just to capture any additional things. Or for some of you, once you get off this chat, you were like, that was one thing I should have asked. So stay tuned for that, because again, we realize that you really provide the real time, what you're experiencing, what the challenges are, to help us make sure that any of our decisions really speak to that. So I just want to say thank you for being on the call and continue to help us make the best in terms of the outcomes and strategies to support you as a small business industry.
Thanks, Torrey.
Yeah.
I'll just add that, while Business for a Better Portland actually only has one member in this fitness sector right now, we are advocating for the needs of small business across sectors. And, one of the questions that raised Devlin about the funding that's available for PPE for small business, that's one of the issues that we've been active in advocating for at a policy level. So while we don't have expertise to your sector, we are doing our best to bring together the voices of different small business owners and lifting up your concerns at the state level primarily. So I put our website in there in case anybody wants to check us out or inquire about the work that we're doing. I just really want to thank EB and Emily and Devlin for joining today as small business owners, and all of the government agency representatives. I know that you're working incredibly hard and you're under an enormous amount of pressure. And so I really want to express our appreciation for that. I know you're on the receiving end of a lot of challenging questions, and so I just want to honor that. With that, I will just wrap up in case are there any outstanding questions that you feel have not been answered? Oh, and to your question, Kay, this is Portland at its best. I mean, we really just came together. We knew that Prosper Portland was organizing sector-specific listening sessions, and they did some for some of the culturally specific organizations as well. And the one listening session that didn't have a co-host was the fitness section. And because EB from Unfold is one of our members, I asked if she would be willing to co-host it with us just as a service to the community. And so we talked about the other kinds of voices that we would need to have on the call. And folks really wanted to hear from dance. And there were a lot of folks who are big fans of VMAC. And so we invited Devlin. She used to serve me coffee a long time ago when we were neighbors. So it's really good to see her again. And then Emily had registered for the event, and we needed someone from a fitness specific industry to speak. So it was very organic, came together under a very short time frame. And I'm sure that Prosper would be pleased to engage you in future sessions. So, and certainly we would as well. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Have a good afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks everyone at Prosper. Thanks, Pauline.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks for hosting, Amy.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see you.